Behind the Shades.
So my name is Terry Tucker. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You cannot tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. So I moved home to find a job. And I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was that I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's, switched to hospital administration, made a major pivot in my life after that and became a police officer. Part of what I did in my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball. But for the last 11.5 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military here in the United States, the Space Force. So you can find me at my blog. It's called Motivational Check. So motivationalcheck.com will get you to me.
Perfect. First and foremost, congratulations on your marriage. That is a fantastic accomplishment. And I say that because I truly believe it is, not because there's so much chaos and divorce in the world, but because it's always good to hear that side, because I think we live in a time where you always hear the bad, right? You hear the divorce, you hear the separation, you hear people fighting over children and things like that. So take us through, if you don't mind, a little bit of your marriage. How did you two meet and how did it end up lasting as long as it has from your perspective?
Faith, prayer. I mean, it's certainly not been perfect. I mean, my wife has been caring for me for 11.5 years with cancer. And, when you sign up, you get married, you take the vows, in sickness and in health till death do us part. But I can't tell you the number of times that I have asked her to just put me in a home, put me somewhere where you can get on with your life, because this has not been a fun experience, as you can imagine. We met in Columbus, Ohio. I was working for a hospital. She was working for a bank. And we went to a leadership program sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. We were in a project team group. This project team, our group, we liked each other. So we would do things outside of this Chamber of Commerce event. We'd go to lunch together and we'd get together on the weekends. We were both dating pretty seriously other people, but somehow we managed to get together. And, I'd known her for about a year with this program. We dated for about 6 months, decided we wanted to get married. We were older. We were 33 years old when we got married. So we had a little bit of life experience behind us. We were a little bit more established. Our daughter came along 3 years later. And, it's just been, we've lived a lot of places in the United States. We've moved a lot. And I think that's been good. I mean, it's one, it causes us to declutter. We get rid of stuff. Yeah, we don't need that anymore. Get that out of here. But it also, it gives us a chance to start over, new experiences, figuring things out. And I think we've just supported each other is why it's worked. When my wife met me, I was a 8 to 5, Monday through Friday hospital administrator. And a couple of years into our marriage, I said, look, I want to be a police officer. And I mean, that's a tremendous shift in, you want to work nights and holidays and all that kind of stuff. And she supported me in that. Conversely, when she lost her job and I was still in law enforcement, I had to get out of law enforcement because she was the primary breadwinner. And okay, we're gonna move to Houston, Texas now, and I'm gonna find something else to do. So it was a lot of supporting each other, loving each other, caring each other. And in all honesty, I think that started with my parents and how they treated my brothers and I growing up.
For some of the couples that I speak with, anytime there's an illness, I always find it difficult because they look at themselves and they say, and I don't know if you've had this thought. I don't want to be a burden on someone that I love so much with my heart. And I thought of that once you mentioned that you went to her and you said, "Hey, just put me in a home because I don't want to put you through that stress." And I think sometimes what we may forget is that we're looking at it through our lens, saying that this is stressful for my partner. But the flip side is, how much more stressful would it be without you? Have you thought about that as well? If you were to, if she, when you came to her and you said that, and she's decided yes, but now she's living without you, she's living without the man that she loves, without the man that she created this beautiful daughter with. Have you thought about that? If that were to happen?
I mean, in a way, I have. I mean, my wife is Norwegian by heritage, and so she's very stoic, and that, and it's she's tough, and I think that's the reason she stayed with me. I think lesser people. I mean, I've had an 11 and a half year battle with cancer, and there's never been a time where I haven't been battling it. There hasn't been like a 5 year window or a 2 year window where I didn't have cancer. It was always something, including most recently, the amputation of my leg during the middle of COVID. I mean, she dropped me off at the hospital the morning I had my amputation, was not allowed to be with me. I can, I remember her saying, "What should I do?" I said, "Just go sit in the parking lot and pray and wait for my doctor to call you when it's over." I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I felt worse about that than I did about having my leg amputated. And it was just, we've just figured it out as we've come along, as we've gone along. How are we going to do this? How are we going to operate now? Now I don't have a leg. I'm in a wheelchair. How do we live our lives now? And, life is not supposed to be miserable. 11 and a half years. We've never had a vacation during that 11 and a half years. It's always been a struggle with this disease. Yes, I've thought about the other side. Would her life be better without me? I think it would be. I really do. It's like you could get out and you could live your life, because her life is taking care of me and working and running the house and doing. I mean, she does everything for me, and I would certainly be in a home if something happened to her. I mean, my daughter might take me in. Not that she would take me in, but yeah, I mean, she's younger, she's married, she's in the military. It'd be harder for her to do that. So I get it. I mean, we deal with this stuff every day. We deal with going to treatment, and well, you got to take me to treatment. Okay, we're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning so we can go to treatment every 3 weeks. It is what it is. We do it because it's working, and I'm staying alive. So
I had a family member that they had cancer, and they caught it very early on. They're able to overcome it and go from there, and it's changed their life. Like, things that mattered don't matter anymore, and they began to realize that there's so much more to life than the things that you can buy. They began to appreciate the time with their family, with their loved ones. And although they may not have been the nicest of people or maybe the most forthcoming and things like that, it totally changed them because their perspective and their perception of life changed. What are some of the changes that you've experienced recently in your life?
You make a great point. I mean, people a lot of times ask me, you were a college athlete, you were a police officer, you were on the SWAT team, you did all these physical things, and now you don't have a leg and you're in a wheelchair. How do you balance that? How do you come to grips with that? And my response is always, when you can't do the things that you're good at, you do the things that are important. And I think that's kind of what you just said. You realize what's important. And being a basketball player was fun, but what was it really important? Not really. Being a police officer, yes, maybe I was impacting more people, sure, but was it really important? What's important is our family and our faith and the friends that we have. I talk about my 3 Fs: faith, family, and friends. I mean, all kinds of things we've had to figure out. I had my leg amputated. I'm supposed to be in the hospital for 10 days to 2 weeks to learn how to function without having a leg. they sent me home after 48 hours because of COVID. It's like, go home, figure it out. And we did. We had to figure it out. We had to figure, well, that rug won't work there because I'll trip, I'll fall, with a walker and things like that. So you just figure your life out in a way that you never expected to. I never expected to be disabled and to be in a wheelchair. I was the big, strong, tough guy. And now I'm the weak and not so tough guy anymore. I'm relying on people to cook for me, to clean for me, to do the laundry, to go to the grocery store. And that's a hard thing for me to do. So I have to have a purpose. I have to have something that I feel I'm contributing to life. And being on podcasts and writing books and articles and things like that have become my focus. It's something that I'm decent at, and it's something that I can do with the disease when I'm not in treatment and things like that.
So you touched on the passion. Take us through the passion that you shared with me, the four truths. Describe them and what do they mean to you?
Yeah, the four truths are I call them the bedrock of my soul. They're, I think, just a good place to start to build a quality life off of. And I guess I should sort of back up. I don't want your audience to think that I have all the answers. I don't. I'm telling you that I've been through some things and I've learned these four truths, and I'm just offering them to people as, if they work for you, take them and incorporate them in your life. If they don't, then find what your truths are in life. So I have them here on a Post-it note in my office. They're one sentence each. So I see them multiple times during the day, and they constantly get reinforced in my mind. So the first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The third one I look at kind of as a legacy type of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And like I said, these are kind of the bedrock of my soul. They're just, I think, a place, they're an anchor that I know they're not going to change. They're not immovable. They're not things that I'm going to say, that doesn't matter anymore. No, these things have mattered my entire life. I just had an opportunity to sort of codify them and say, okay, for me, this is what my heart says. This is what my soul says is important in life. And then I guess we can break them down if you want to go through them a little bit.
Absolutely, because the fourth one, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. I remember when I saw that, when you shared it with me, it reminded me of the story I shared earlier today with you, where I didn't have both my parents growing up, and I had some struggles in the church and within my religion and things of that nature, which led me to disconnect and feel confused. But I wanted more out of my life. And then you shared the story about the 75-year-old grandmother and the 13-year-old kid, and when you bring them home, there's that struggle there as well. I didn't want to be another statistic. I want to make sure that I found success in a way that represented me, as well as made me feel good, as well as the outcome was I survived it, I grew from it, I understood it. Now let me help others. So that's why that fourth one resonated with me. Do you have a favorite out of the four, or one that you feel is more impactful in your life than the others?
Yeah, I used to. The answer to that question was, I used to think no, that they were all equal, that all of them were of the same importance. And the more I've learned, the more I've read, the more I've kind of grown, I think the first one really is the most important. Control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. When I was in high school, I had 3 knee surgeries. And I remember when I went back playing basketball after those knee surgeries, I remember my brain was putting all kinds of negative thoughts into my mind. Things like, hey, you're probably a step slower since your surgeries, and college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, I am still playing at an elite level, and coaches are still reaching out about the possibility of playing for their college or university. I learned early that I needed to sort of flipped the switch, changed the script of what was going on inside my brain. And I remember the Cleveland Clinic did a study, I don't know how many years ago, sort of about brain function. And they said that on any given day, we have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts that pass through our mind, most of which we don't even pay attention to. And only about 3,500 of those thoughts are new thoughts, things that we haven't thought about before, we didn't think about yesterday. And our brain operates at a speed of about 1,000 words a minute. Now I'm old enough that I took typing when I was in high school. 40 words a minute in typing got you an A. So 1,000 words a minute is just something that is so, I can't even think about that. And the other thing about the brain is it produces enough energy to light a 25 watt light bulb, which I thought was interesting in and of itself. The problem with most of us, and I've done this, is that we think with our fears and our insecurities instead of using our minds. I mean, I know I've done this. Like, oh, I'd like to do that. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I don't have enough information, or what will people think about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. And I always tell, especially when I speak to young people, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
And regret is something that impacts all of us, and it's very damaging. I know you can have a dream, and the dream could be, I want to be president. I want to save the world. I want to be the best father in the world. I want to be the best husband in the world. And you allow anxiety, maybe hesitation, to prevent you from your dream, and then you regret it afterwards, and that regret eats away at you and it stays within you for years and years on end. And it reminds me of this movie that I used to watch where you had someone who, they were so hesitant to display their skill. They're a master painter, right? They painted beautiful, beautiful artwork, and they didn't ever get to share that passion or that skill with the rest of the world, and they lived with regret, and it led them to alcoholism. It led them to drugs, it led them to all these other things. So you have their talent and the lack of ability to show it to the world destroying them from within. Do you have those types of conversations when you're discussing with other people to help them to understand how to navigate through their life?
Yeah, the easiest way, and it really is simple. It's hard to do, but it's simple. People ask me, how do you control your mind? How do you callous your mind to deal with pain and discomfort in our life? And I always tell them the easiest way to do that is to do things you don't want to do. I mean, we know this. We know that our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort and to seek pleasure. So to the brain, the status quo, the way things are right now, hey, it's comfortable, it's familiar, just leave it alone. The problem with that is the only way we're going to grow, the only way we're going to get better, the only way we're going to improve is if we step outside those comfort zones and do things that make us uncomfortable. And I think the other thing that gets us in trouble is we try to control things that are really outside of our control. I remember when I was in college, I went to a military college, the Citadel, and we had a president one year who was a former admiral in the Navy. He'd been a fighter pilot, a naval aviator during the Vietnam War, had been shot down, spent 8 years in a prisoner of war camp. And somebody asked him at an event, and I didn't spend a lot of time around him, he was the president of the college, but somebody asked him who survived that brutality, that abuse, that torture. And he said, well, let me tell you who didn't survive. He said, it wasn't the big, tall, strong, tough guys that thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And this was interesting as well. He said the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. You know, these were people that thought that they would be rescued or let go by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter, and Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter would come and go, and they wouldn't be rescued or let go. And he said those people died of a broken heart. He said the people that survived were those who understood what they could control and controlled it. And according to him, basically, as prisoners of war, The only thing they could control were their thoughts in their mind and the breathing in their lungs. Everything else was at the discretion of the enemy. And I think that's where we get in trouble. We try to control, we try to pile on all these things that are totally outside of our ability to control things. And that leads to anxiety, that leads to depression, that leads to, us with the mindset of, I can't do this, I'm a failure. And if you understand what you can control in your life and control that and let the other stuff take care of it, I think you get to a point where, okay, I may not be able to be successful, however you define that term today, but knowing that I'm doing the right thing, maybe next month or next year or 2 years from now, I will get to that point. But I think the other thing we deal with is that I need instant gratification. I need it immediately. I need it now. I need to be successful. And if I don't get it, somehow I'm a failure. I love the quote by Usain Bolt, probably the fastest man in the world. He said, I spent 4 years training to run 9 seconds. He said, and people give up on their dreams, give up on their hopes after 2 months. And I love that quote, 4 years to run 9 seconds. And so many of us give up after just a few weeks.
That's an excellent quote, because Usain Bolt is one of my favorite athletes, and I've seen so many of his races, and that is a fantastic point where you're 4 years for 9 seconds. Then when you compared it to some people who give up after a couple of months, we've all know someone or seen someone that has broken dreams, and we may have felt they've given up too soon, but it seems like it was soon enough for them. And one of my dreams was to be able to do exactly what I'm doing with you here today, Terry. It's having a conversation, sharing your story, learning from you, and spreading your insights to those who may be inspired by it as well. And there's been difficulty along the road, and there's been times where I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this today. I just want to sit back like a pig in mud and not do anything, right? But I said no, because the story that I didn't do today could have probably saved someone's life. And that's the way I look at it. So, Terry, for you, what keeps you motivated? What keeps you inspired to carry forward?
What I call my 3 Fs, which are faith, family, and friends. And they're in that order for a reason. I have a very strong faith life. And, when I got cancer, people were like, well, who do you blame? I'm like, what do you mean, who do I blame? Well, you got cancer. You have to blame somebody. We are great, especially in the West, of whatever it is. We start down the road toward a goal or a dream, and we butt up against an impediment. Something gets in our way, and we can't get over it, around it, or through it, so we quit. But we just don't quit. Now we've got to, blame somebody because we gave up. We got to blame our parents or our station in life or our boss or whoever it ends up being. And then when people found out I have a faith life, they're like, well, you must blame God. I'm like, no, I don't blame God. I used to joke with them. I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, Terry Tucker, cancer today. But I do believe God has given me the faith, the courage, the strength to get through this. So faith is number one for me. Family is the next thing. As I mentioned, it's my wife and daughter and my mother is still alive, and I have 2 brothers. But when I had my leg amputated and I found out I had these tumors in my lungs that I'm still being treated for, my doctor wanted to put me on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years into this fight. And I looked at him and I said, is it going to save my life? He said, no, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I said, well, if I'm going to die anyway, I don't think I want to be that sick. I think I would rather not have the chemotherapy and enjoy the time I had left. But I'll go home and talk to my family. And this is a funny story, but it really happened this way. So I go home and I start telling my wife and daughter what the doctor wants to do. And my daughter's immediately like, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that, So we end up sitting around the kitchen table and each individually talking about how we feel about me having chemotherapy. And then when we're done with that, our daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raised their hand. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? But I remembered back in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we love the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I love my family more than I love myself. And in hindsight, it was the bridge that got me to the drug that I'm on now, that I've been on for the last 3 years. And then finally, friends. And Terrain, there were people that I was 100% sure that when something bad happened to me, they would be there. They would be in the foxhole with me. They would not abandon me. And several of those people were like, Terry, I can't deal with this. You're 51 years old. You've got this terminal cancer. I can't deal with that. And then there were people who I never thought would be there for me, who have been with me for the last 11 and a half years and have never left my side. So faith, family, and friends is really what keeps me going, what keeps motivating me to get up every day.
I pull for that same sword. My faith is my shield, and as a person who's in the faith, you know that we protect ourselves through the shape, our shield, our loins, our helmet, our sword, and so on and so forth. And it's amazing to hear that you have the three F's and they're working for you, because family is so important, especially, and friends, because that's your support system. And I haven't gone through anything terminal. I haven't gone through any terminal illness, and hopefully I don't have to experience that. But I know people that have, and they say something so similar to you, Terry, that they had an expectation that these type of friends or these type of people would have been there for them, and some weren't. And but one thing they would say that they really, really respected is that the people who they didn't think were going to be there, when they showed up to support them, to be there in ways that they wanted other people to be, they found a new respect for themselves. And also they began to self-reflect and say, maybe I misunderstood this person that supported me. Maybe I didn't give them enough credit. Maybe I didn't have the right expectations of them. Because there's an old saying that anytime you're looking for support, especially when you start a new job or a business or a dream or anything, they say that your acquaintances will support you more than your friends. But when you get sick, you want that support, as long as it's good supports, and wherever it comes from, you're happy, because you can feel alone, you can feel isolated, you can feel a number of things when you're going through it. So when you had your family and you had this board meeting, which I find absolutely phenomenal, by the way, and they outvoted you, and they wanted the best for you, because I'm pretty sure it came from a source of love, just like how you accepting it came from a source of love. When you look back, how do you feel knowing that they had your best interest in mind, especially in a difficult situation?
Yeah, I think you tend to think that when you have cancer, life revolves around you. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, when I got cancer, I think cancer tends to isolate us. I think initially it isolates us from our friends, it isolates us from our family, and it can even isolate us from ourselves, from who we really are. And so, I mean, I am incredibly grateful, incredibly fortunate that I have people that support me, that call me, that help me. And I've understood that. And then I've turned that around in my life, because there are people that have reached out to me there's a friend of mine in Canada with a brain, just had brain cancer. And he called me literally in tears from the hospital. And I didn't think we were that close. But all of a sudden he's like, Terry, and I'm like, okay, I got to be here for this guy. I've got to be here for him, however that looks. Maybe it's not to say a word. And as you probably figured out, I can talk a whole lot, but sometimes I just don't need to say anything. I just need to let him talk. I have a neighbor who is going through ovarian cancer and chemotherapy, and lost her hair, and is having to deal with the vanity of that. It's like, Angela, you're a good looking woman. Why do you, who cares? Who cares whether you lose your hair? It doesn't matter. That's not the person you are. The person you are is inside. And the person we all love and care about is that person, not the person who lost their hair. But I get it. I mean, we want to feel whole. We want to feel like ourselves. And when we're throwing up, and when we're having diarrhea, and when we're losing our hair, and we feel like crap, you want to feel like you're in control. And those are times when you're not, and you need other people to step up and help you. And I would absolutely 100% be dead several times if it hadn't been for those people in my life who saw something or who said, you know, if this isn't right, I'm gonna call and get you help. I would be dead if it hadn't been for those people.
It's like the illness is like shedding away your former self, right? The hair, your personality, maybe how you look at yourself. And you mentioned a good point when you said that, well, when you ask a question, does it really, do these things really matter in the long run? Because short term, of course, you know, no one wants to be experiencing these things short term, right? But in the long term, if you have a choice
Right.
between this and your life, this or a good standard of living, I think that's the way people are going to look at it and say, you know what, Terry, you're right. Some of these things, they don't really matter long term. And one thing that you touched on, which I think is an amazing point, is that you showed up for your friend in the way that he wanted you to show up. I think oftentimes we get in a situation or the trap where we try to overcompensate our support, and the person may need just for you to pick up that phone call and just to listen to the tears. So, how important was it for you to be there for someone, knowing that you've been through a similar situation and you had other people to support you as well?
It's incredibly important, and I don't think we realize how much of an impact our life, our story has on other people. And I'll give you a story that illustrates that. I'm treated every 3 weeks in an infusion center at the hospital here in Colorado, and this nurse that I met, she was about 25 at the time. She was already a nurse, but she was learning how to do things on the unit. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And she came in and she said, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I'm a little uncomfortable telling it to you. And I didn't know how to respond to that. I was like, well, it sounds like I would enjoy hearing the story. I hope you decide you want to tell it to me. And she's in and out for the next couple hours, and then finally comes in and sits down. She said, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I'd had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my mom and dad. I was going to quit nursing, and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And I see how you struggle through your treatments and what it does to your body. And she said, then I went back in your file and I read everything you've been through for these 11 and a half years. And she said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that just my life, how I was living my life, had had a positive impact on her. I can promise everybody who's listening to us, there are people out there. Some you may know, some you may not know. They're kind of watching you from on far, but they're watching the courage with which you handle the trials, the adversities in your life, and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So don't think that your life doesn't matter, that nobody cares, that it's not that big of a deal. I can promise you, there's somebody, there may be multiple people. There are people out there watching how you handle your life, your struggles, and would give everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So remember that the next time you think, this doesn't matter. It does matter, and somebody's watching you.
Yes, we're inspiring in silence. We may not know, and the person may not ever say anything, but we definitely are. Like, I look at your story, Terry, and it's someone that pulled from their faith, pulled from their family, pulled from their friends, who's surrounded by love, who's going through a very difficult time, a situation that many of us would not even wish on our enemy. But yet, you go out of your way, you go about your day to make sure that you're inspiring people. You do the podcast, you motivate people, you share your story. These are fantastic ways, because there's people out there that they may not be comfortable having these types of conversations, but they're very comfortable listening and saying, I remember that guy, Terry. What he went through was inspiring. My mother went through something similar. My father went through something similar. I didn't know how I was going to function, but listening to Terry, I knew, hey, this is what I can do. Just being an ear to their tears, just being a shoulder for their pain. is sufficient for a lot of people. And as we close, Terry, what's some final words that you want to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I trying to decide which other story I want to tell you. I'll give you this one. So again, the stories are either nursing related or basketball related. So and this is another nursing story for you. So I had a nurse who asked me recently what it was like to have my foot amputated in 2018 and then have my leg amputated in 2020. And I told her it certainly has not been easy. You know, I'm 6'8", learning to walk again. Falling from this height, not an option. You get hurt in that. So, you know, it's not like when you were 2 or 3 years old learning to walk. But what I told her was cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my heart, it can't touch my mind, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Dwayne. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. And we spend a tremendous amount of time working on this body. You know, we go to the gym, we eat right, we get enough rest, we reduce stress. And I'm not telling you not to do that. I think you absolutely should do that. But what I am suggesting is maybe every day, spend a little more time working on who you really are, your heart, your mind, and your soul. We know this body's going to die. We know it's going to decay and go away. But your heart, your mind, and your soul, I believe those things are eternal. Those things live on. And I don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them as we should.